There are men who build walls so high they forget windows exist. Jin Taehyun was that kind of man. He stood in the center of his Seoul penthouse on a Tuesday night, holding a folder of documents like they were the only truth in the world. Across from him stood Zara Okoye, his wife of 2 years, the woman who had laughed at his worst jokes and made his cold apartment feel like somewhere worth returning to. She was wearing a cream blouse. Her hands were still at her sides. The folder contained messages, financial records, photographs. Evidence, he called it. Proof that she had been feeding information to his competitors. Proof that everything between them had been a performance. He laid it all out on the glass table, piece by piece, the way a prosecutor builds a case. He didn't raise his voice. That was the thing about Taehyun, he never needed to. His silence carried more weight than other men screaming. When he finished, he looked at her and said simply, "We're done." Zara looked at the documents. Then she looked at him. She didn't cry. She didn't reach for his hand. She said 4 words so quietly he almost missed them. "You didn't ask me." Then she picked up her coat and walked out. People who knew Jin Taehyun described him the same way every time. Precise. Controlled. Brilliant. He had built his investment firm from one borrowed office in Gangnam into a company that moved markets. He didn't do this with charm or luck. He did it with a system. Every decision ran through the same filter: evidence, probability, outcome. Emotion was noise. Sentiment was a liability. He had learned this early, watching his father lose everything by trusting the wrong partner because that partner was family. Love, his father had said after, makes you blind. Taehyun had decided then, at 16 years old, that he would never be blind. So when the folder arrived, delivered by someone he trusted within his own organization, he read it twice. He cross-referenced 3 of the documents himself. The trail was clear and the logic was airtight. Zara had access. Zara had motive. The numbers matched. There was a woman in his office who had handed him the folder, Han Seo-rin, his chief of staff, someone who had worked beside him for 4 years. She had stood in the doorway while he read, saying nothing, watching carefully. He had not noticed her watching. He had been too busy being certain. That was the first mistake. He would not understand it for another 4 years. The evidence looked perfect because it was built to look perfect. 3 sets of messages between Zara and a man named Park Dae-won, a mid-level executive at a rival firm. The messages discuss numbers, real numbers, internal numbers that only someone inside Taehyun's circle could know. There were 2 transfers from a savings account in Zara's name. Small amounts, but timed precisely around 2 major deals that had quietly fallen apart. Taehyun had laid it all in front of her, and she had looked at each piece slowly, without rushing. Then she had looked up and said, "I didn't do this." Her voice was flat. Not panicked. Not rehearsed. Just flat and clear, the way someone speaks when they're so tired of something they can't even summon fear anymore. He had said, "The documents disagree." She had said, "Then investigate." He had said nothing. Because investigating meant doubt. And doubt meant he had already made a mistake by trusting her. He was not prepared to sit with that. So he closed the folder. He told himself her calmness was the calmness of someone caught. He told himself that her clear eyes were the eyes of a practiced liar. He told himself these things because the alternative, that he was wrong, was too costly to consider. The divorce papers arrived on a Thursday morning. Zara signed every page without calling him. Without sending a single message. She used the pen from the hotel room where she had been staying since that Tuesday night, and she signed her name clearly on every line that asked for it. Her lawyer, a quiet, efficient woman, collected the papers and left. Zara sat in the hotel room for a while after. She didn't stare at her phone. She didn't look at photographs. She looked out the window at the Han River moving below, gray and steady, going where it was going regardless of anything happening on its banks. At the firm, Taehyun was informed that the papers had been signed. His assistant told him. He nodded once and returned to a call he had paused. That afternoon, in a different part of Seoul, an elderly woman named Madame Kwon Mi-suk received a message on her personal phone. It read only, "Done." She set the phone face down on her desk and resumed her tea. She was Taehyun's mother's oldest friend. She had known him since childhood. She had also, for reasons that would not become clear for a long time, helped make sure the right documents reached the right desk at exactly the right moment. Taehyun, of course, knew none of this. Zara found out in an airport bathroom. She was leaving Korea, a one-way ticket to London, a single carry-on bag, and the kind of stillness that settles over a person when they have already grieved something fully and are now simply moving forward. She had bought the test at a pharmacy near the gate, half from instinct, half because her body had been telling her something quiet for 2 weeks that her mind had been too occupied to hear. She stood in the stall with the test balanced on the edge of the sink and she waited. 2 pink lines. She looked at them for a long time. A child's voice outside the stall called for its mother. A flight announcement echoed through the terminal in Korean and then in English. Zara breathed in once, slowly, the way a person does when they are deciding something without knowing yet that they are deciding it. She was 31 years old. She was alone in an airport bathroom. She was carrying the child of a man who had looked at 4 years of her love and chosen a folder over her face. She placed the test carefully in the bin. She washed her hands. She looked at herself in the mirror for exactly 3 seconds. Then she picked up her bag and walked to her gate without hurrying. On the plane, somewhere over the darkness between Korea and the rest of the world, Zara made her decision. It didn't come with tears or a long conversation with herself. It came quietly, the way the most permanent decisions often do, not as a choice being made, but as a truth being recognized. He had looked at her and chosen not to believe her. Not because the evidence was impossible to question, she knew it could have been questioned, easily, by anyone willing to try. But because questioning it would have cost him something. Certainty. Control. The clean story he needed to tell himself. He had chosen the story over her. So she chose herself. She would not call him. She would not send a message through a lawyer or a mutual friend. She would not stand outside the door of his certainty and knock again. She had knocked once. She had said 4 words, "You didn't ask me," and he had closed the folder. That was his answer. The child growing quietly inside her deserved a life built on solid ground, on people who chose to look, who chose to ask, who chose to stay present when the truth was inconvenient. Taehyun was not that person. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The plane moved through the dark. Below, the world was asleep. Ahead, London was waiting. London welcomed Zara the way big cities welcome people who arrive quietly, without fanfare, without judgment, with just enough space to become someone. She found a small flat in Peckham. She found work within 3 weeks, consulting for a trade relations firm that valued her background in international business law. She learned which markets had the best plantain. She learned which bus routes were reliable and which were not. She built a routine, and within that routine, she built a life. She did not tell her mother everything. She told her enough, that the marriage had ended, that she was starting over, that she was fine. Her mother, a woman who had raised 4 children on a teacher's salary in Lagos and never once asked anyone to feel sorry for her, listened and then said, "Build well." That was all. Zara built. She saved carefully. She set up a nursery in the 2nd bedroom of the flat 6 weeks before her due date, painting the walls herself on a Saturday, a playlist of old Fela Kuti songs running through a small Bluetooth speaker on the floor. She did not put photographs of Taehyun anywhere. She did not throw them away either. She placed them in a box in the high shelf of the hallway closet. That was fair. That was enough. Amara came into the world on a rainy October morning, 7 pounds and 4 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and eyes that opened slowly and looked at everything with an attention that felt, even then, like something inherited. Zara named her Amara Jean. She kept his name in there because the child was half of him whether he knew it or not, and Zara was not in the business of erasing true things just because they were painful. Amara grew the way children grow when they are loved carefully, steadily, with roots. By the time she was 2, she was already watching people the way her father watched people, quietly, from the outside of a room, taking information in before deciding how to respond. She had Zara's warmth and Taehyun's precision, a combination that made her, even as a small child, someone people leaned toward in rooms. She asked questions about everything. She made friends slowly, but kept them permanently. She had a way of sitting very still when she was thinking that made her look older than she was. Zara watched her daughter sometimes across the breakfast table and felt two things at once: complete love and the particular ache of watching someone carry the face of a person who made the wrong choice. By the time Amara was 3, Zara had been promoted twice. She was now leading a team of 12, managing cross-border trade negotiations for companies in 4 countries. She was good at her work the way people are good at things they have always understood, but only recently had space to fully use. She did not date. Not from grief or bitterness, she examined herself honestly on this point, but because she was building something and she needed her hands free. Her world was organized. Mornings began with Amara's school run, which Amara treated as a serious daily event requiring the correct shoes. Evenings ended with a book and a cup of tea and, usually, a small warm body that had migrated from the next room and was now occupying 2/3 of Zara's bed. There was no bitterness in the flat on Peckham Road. There was something better than that: steadiness. The kind of life that does not need to be announced because it simply holds together under its own weight. But steady lives are not invisible. And there are people in the world, certain careful, calculating people, who make a profession of finding what others think is hidden. One such person had recently begun paying attention to a trade consultant in London with an interesting past and an even more interesting child. His name was Choi Byung-jun. He was not famous. He preferred it that way. He moved through the edges of Seoul's financial world like water moves through cracks, quiet, patient, finding the weak points in structures other people thought were solid. He had been watching Jin Taehyun's organization for 2 years, not to destroy it immediately, but to understand it. And understanding it meant understanding its pressure points. Taehyun had no family close enough to be useful. No partner. No visible softness. He was, by most appearances, a man without edges anyone could grip. Then Byung-jun's investigator found Zara Okoye in London. Cross-referenced public immigration records, a professional profile, a consulting firm. Routine. But then the investigator noted the child, a daughter, 3 years old, registered under the name Amara Jean. The surname stopped Byung-jun mid-sentence when he read the report. He set it down. He picked it up again. He did the arithmetic carefully, the way a man does when he suspects something significant and wants to be completely sure before he moves. When he was sure, he leaned back in his chair and was quiet for a long time. Then he made 2 calls. One to a contact in London. One to someone much closer to Taehyun's world than anyone would expect. Byung-jun's investigator confirmed everything in 8 days. Amara Jean, daughter of Zara Okoye, born in London, aged 3. The birth certificate listed no father. But the timeline was exact: conception placed clearly within Taehyun and Zara's marriage. The child's age was precise. Her surname was deliberate. And the investigator, a thorough man, had also managed to obtain a clear photograph taken in a park in Peckham, a small girl on a swing, dark eyes, sharp jaw, a particular way of holding her head slightly to one side while she looked at something. Byung-jun had worked with Jin Taehyun once, briefly, 3 years earlier. He knew what that face looked like. This child was not a question. She was an answer, and a very useful one. He understood immediately what this meant. Taehyun did not know the child existed. If he found out through the wrong channel, through a controlled reveal, at the wrong moment, it would fracture something in him. And a fractured man made different decisions than a certain one. Slower decisions. Emotional decisions. Byung-jun had been waiting for a way into Taehyun's empire for 2 years. He had just found a door. He told no one yet. He needed the right moment. He needed the right room. He was, above all things, a patient man. Byung-jun began carefully. He did not approach Zara directly; that would create a trail. Instead, he used her professional world. His contact in London flagged her name to the organizing committee of a global trade summit scheduled in New York 4 months from now. He pulled in a favor from someone who owed him one and made sure Zara Okoye received an invitation to speak on a panel. It was legitimate work. She was qualified, more than qualified, and this was what made the plan elegant. No deception on the surface. Just positioning. He also made sure that Jin Taehyun's firm received an invitation. Taehyun's attendance at events like this was nearly automatic. His team would accept without hesitation. Neither of them would know the other was attending until they were in the same room. And Byung-joon had also learned, through his London contact, something that changed the shape of his plans significantly. Zara was bringing Amara to New York. A friend in the city, a school break, a short trip before the summit. The child would be nearby. That detail changed everything. He had not planned to involve the child, not directly. But he recognized, coldly and clearly, that he would not need to. Some things, once placed in the same room, resolve themselves. In Seoul, Taehyun's life looked the way expensive things always look: complete. His firm had expanded into Japan and Singapore. He owned 2 apartments and a weekend house in Jeju that he visited approximately never. His name appeared in financial publications regularly, always accompanied by words like visionary and decisive. He ran 12 kilometers every morning and was in bed by 10. He had dated twice in 4 years. Both relationships had ended within 3 months, not dramatically but quietly, the way a door closes when no one is fighting to keep it open. His chief of staff, Han Seo-rin, remained exactly where she had always been, at the edge of every meeting, managing every detail, anticipating every need before it was spoken. She was efficient. She was loyal. She was also, though Taehyun had not yet turned that particular lens on her, the person who had delivered the folder. He had never asked her how she got it. He had never asked who gave it to her. He had simply received the information and acted on it, because that was what certain men do. They trust the proof and never turn around to question the hand that brought it. There was a silence in his life that he had named productivity. It looked like success from the outside. From the inside, it was harder to name. The Global Trade and Investment Summit in New York was held in a hotel in Midtown Manhattan, the kind of place with ceilings high enough to make you feel briefly important just by walking in. Taehyun arrived on a Tuesday evening. His team had prepared his schedule: 3 panels, 2 private dinners, 1 keynote introduction. He reviewed the agenda in the car from JFK and approved it without changes. He did not look at the full speaker list. There was no reason to. Zara arrived the next morning, Amara holding her hand through the terminal, pulling slightly ahead the way children do when they've decided the destination is interesting enough to move toward with purpose. They checked into a smaller hotel 2 blocks from the summit venue. Amara had been told her mother would be working for 2 days, and she would be staying with Andy Deli, Zara's friend from university, who had lived in Brooklyn for the past 6 years, and who Amara considered approximately the most entertaining person alive. The plan was simple. Zara would attend the summit. Amara would be safely 2 blocks away. There was no reason for their worlds to cross. This was the plan. Plans are the stories we tell ourselves before the world reminds us that it has its own schedule. The first panel ended at noon. Zara walked into the main hall holding a coffee she hadn't had time to drink and looking at her phone, reading a message from Delhi about Amara's breakfast preferences, when she looked up and he was simply there. 12 feet away. Speaking quietly to a man in a gray suit. For years. He looked the same and different in the way people do, same face, same posture, but something in him was settled differently, heavier maybe, like a house that has been lived in alone too long. He hadn't seen her yet. She had approximately 4 seconds before he turned. She thought about leaving. She did not leave. She stood still and waited, and when he turned and his eyes found her face, she watched the exact moment his certainty ran out. He went completely still. The man in the gray suit said something to him. Taehyun did not respond. He and Zara looked at each other across 12 feet of expensive carpet and did not speak. Around them, the summit continued: voices, movement, the clink of glasses. None of it touched that 12 feet. Then someone stepped between them, blocking the line of sight, and the moment broke. Taehyun turned back to his conversation. Zara finished walking to the window. Neither of them pretended the other wasn't in the room. It was Deli's idea to bring Amara to the lunch reception. Zara had not planned it. Deli had texted, "She's asking for you, and honestly, she'll behave. She's been angelic all morning," and Zara, who knew her daughter's patience had a precise and non-negotiable limit, had said yes. Amara arrived in a yellow dress, holding Deli's hand, eyes already scanning the room with the particular attention she brought to every new space. Zara met them near the entrance and took Amara's hand. They were moving toward the quieter side of the hall. Zara had spotted a seating area away from the main crowd when Amara stopped. Children stop for specific reasons. Either they are tired or hungry, or something has caught their complete attention. Amara was looking at a man standing near the window. He was talking to someone, his profile toward them, his posture very straight. Amara did not say anything yet. She just looked. She had a habit of examining things fully before she committed to a response. Zara felt the stop and looked down at her daughter. Then she looked up to see what Amara was looking at. Her hand tightened without her deciding to tighten it. Across the room, Taehyun had not yet turned. He did not know. He was still the only person in that hall who did not feel the ground shifting. Zara moved. She began steering Amara toward the seating area, casually, the way you redirect a child without making the redirection obvious. But Amara was not a child who missed redirection. She planted her feet politely and looked up at her mother. "Who is that man?" she asked. Her voice was clear and even. Amara rarely whispered. She had been told that if something was worth asking, it was worth asking properly. Zara said, "Someone from work." Amara accepted this the way she accepted most things, filed it, but did not close the file. They sat down. Deli brought juice. Amara drank it slowly and continued watching the room with the patience of someone waiting for something to confirm itself. Across the hall, Taehyun's conversation ended. He turned. His eyes moved across the room the way they always did, assessing, categorizing. They passed over the seating area and then came back. He saw Zara first. Then, beside her, a small girl in a yellow dress who was already looking at him. He didn't move. The girl tilted her head slightly to the left. He had seen that angle. He had seen it in photographs of himself as a child, in the mirror on mornings when something was working out in his mind. He didn't understand what he was feeling. He only knew it was not nothing. For the rest of that afternoon, the hall was full of the particular tension that gathers between people who have unfinished business and not enough space to avoid each other. Taehyun moved through 3 conversations and retained almost nothing from them. His eyes kept returning to the seating area. Zara had felt his attention and had chosen, deliberately, not to look back. She kept her focus on Amara, on Deli, on the coffee she had now finished. Amara ate 2 small sandwiches and then fell asleep against Zara's arm with the efficiency of a child who has decided the situation no longer requires her participation. The afternoon session was beginning. Delegates began moving toward the conference rooms. Zara shifted Amara gently, preparing to take her back to the hotel. Across the hall, Taehyun stood at the edge of the movement. He was watching them. Not with the cold assessment he brought to everything else. With something unsteady. The kind of look that appears on a person's face when their system of certainty has received information it cannot immediately process. He had seen her face. He had seen the child. He had done the same arithmetic Byungjun had done, and his body had understood before his mind caught up. He didn't approach. Not yet. He stood at the edge of the crowd and felt the ground beneath 4 years of certainty begin to shift. It happened the next morning. Zara had not planned to bring Amara back to the summit. But the morning session had run early, Deli had a work call, and Amara had decided, firmly and without negotiation, that she wanted to see her mother. So they were in the lobby, Zara signing a document at the reception desk, Amara standing slightly behind her, when Taehyun came out of the elevator. He saw Zara immediately. He walked toward her, because he had spent the night deciding he would not walk away again. He stopped a few feet short. Zara looked up from the document. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It was the longest sentence 2 people had ever not said. Then a small voice. Very clear. Very even. "Mommy." Amara had moved forward. She was looking at Taehyun with her head tilted, her dark eyes steady, the same attention she gave everything that required understanding. She said it the way children say things they don't yet know are enormous. "Why does he look like me?" Zara closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Taehyun did not move. Amara looked up at him with complete seriousness and said the next word as if she had been waiting her whole life to place it correctly. Dad. The lobby was full of people. Nobody in it existed. Taehyun dropped to one knee. He looked at his daughter. His face did not break. It opened. He did not speak right away. He looked at Amara for a long moment, at her eyes, which were his eyes, at the line of her jaw, at the way she held her head, and something moved through him that had no name he had learned yet. Amara looked back at him with patience. She was 4 years old, and she did not know what this moment meant. She only knew that this person had the same face she saw in the mirror and that this fact seemed important. Taehyun said, very quietly, "What's your name?" "Amara," she said. "Amara Jean." He nodded slowly. He stood. He looked at Zara. Zara had not moved. She was watching him the way she had watched him in the penthouse 4 years ago, not with fear, not with heat, with the flat, steady gaze of someone who has already decided how much of themselves they are willing to spend on this moment. He said, "I need to talk to you." She said, "I know." He said, "Not here." No, she agreed, "Not here." Amara reached out and touched the sleeve of his jacket with 2 fingers. The way she touched things she found interesting. Taehyun looked down at her hand on his sleeve. He said nothing. But something in his posture changed, some long-held tightness released, like a door that has been locked for years finally resting against its frame. That evening, alone in his hotel room, Taehyun did the thing he had refused to do 4 years ago. He investigated. He pulled out his laptop and began with the documents from the folder. He still had copies in his personal files, archived the way he archived everything. He had looked at them then and seen guilt. Now he looked at them and saw the shape of them. The precision. The timing. The way each piece connected to the next with an elegance that real evidence rarely had. Real evidence was messy. Real betrayal left ragged edges. This had been clean. This had been built. He pulled the financial transfer records and cross-referenced the account numbers against public records. One account had been opened 9 days before the first message in the folder and had not been used since. He went further. He pulled the name Park Dae-won and traced it. The man existed. He worked at a rival firm. But the messages had been routed through a server that traced back, with 2 hours of careful work, to a device registered to an address in the Gangnam district of Seoul. He knew that address. He had visited it. It was the home of Madame Kwon Mi-suk, his mother's closest friend. The woman who had been at every important moment of his adult life, standing in the background, watching carefully. His hands were very still on the keyboard. He called Zara the next morning. She met him in a quiet cafe 2 streets from the hotel, without Amara, who was with Deli. She arrived before him, and was already sitting with a tea when he walked in. He sat across from her. He looked like someone who had not slept and had decided that sleep was not the priority. She looked like herself, composed, unhurried, wearing the same quiet authority she had always worn and that he had, for years ago, somehow mistaken for coldness. He said, "I looked at the documents." She said nothing. The account was opened 9 days before the supposed first contact, he said. The server trace leads to Madame Kwon. Zara wrapped both hands around her cup. "I know," she said. He stared. "You knew." "I didn't know who. But I knew the evidence wasn't mine. I'd never opened that account. I didn't know those messages." Her voice was steady. "I told you to investigate." He said nothing for a long moment. Then, "Why didn't you fight harder?" She looked at him with something that was not quite sadness and not quite anger. "Because I had already fought," she said. "I stood in that room, and I looked you in the eyes and I told you the truth. And you chose the folder." She set her cup down carefully. "You told me everything I needed to know." The full truth arrived in pieces over the next 72 hours, and each piece was worse than the one before it. Seo-rin had built the evidence. Taehyun found the construction when he finally turned the lens on her, the access she had to internal systems, the communications she had quietly routed through external servers, the one thread she had not fully removed because she had not imagined he would ever look. She had been in love with him for years. This was not, by itself, the motive. The motive was that Madame Kwon had wanted Zara gone. She had believed, with the conviction of a woman who had managed people her entire life, that Zara Okoye was wrong for Taehyun. Wrong in ways she had explained to Seo-rin over a series of meetings that his investigator now found in a set of deleted calendar entries. The conspiracy was not grand. It was small and personal and built entirely on the decisions of two people who had decided they knew better than he did about his own life. He had handed them the ability to make that decision by trusting a folder over a face. When he called Seo-rin, she didn't deny it. She said, "I did it because it was right." He said nothing. He hung up. Then he sat in his hotel room in New York and understood, fully and without any possible revision, that he had destroyed his own family with his own certainty. He went to Zara that afternoon. She opened the door of her hotel room and stepped back to let him in. Amara was napping in the next room. He could hear the small, even sound of her breathing through the half-open door. He sat where she indicated. He looked at his hands for a moment. Then he looked at her. He said, "I know what I did. I know what it cost." He did not look away. "I'm not here to ask you to forgive me right now. I don't think that's something I've earned. But I'm here to say, in front of you, clearly, that I was wrong. Not just mistaken. Wrong. I chose a folder over you. I chose to be certain over choosing to look." She sat across from him. She listened. He said, "I want to be Amara's father. Not to have a claim on her. Not to manage the situation. To be present. To show up. To be someone she can know." A silence. "What that looks like," he said, "I will follow your terms." Completely. Zara was quiet for a long time. Long enough that the only sound was the city outside and Amara breathing in the next room. Then she said, "There are conditions." He said, "I know." She said, "No control. No entitlement. Only consistency." He said, "Yes." She said, "If you miss, I decide what happens next." "Yes," he said again. And she believed him. Not because he deserved it yet. Because she could see he finally understood the difference. 3 weeks later, on a Saturday afternoon in a park near Zara's flat in London, Amara Jean met her father properly for the first time. He arrived at the gate of the park at exactly the agreed time, which Amara noted approvingly and reported to Zara in full. He had brought nothing, no gifts, no distractions. Just himself, which was, Zara had told him, the only thing required. Amara walked up to him with the directness she brought to everything and said, "I'm going to show you the ducks." He said, "Okay." They walked. She narrated the ducks with the authority of someone who had studied them extensively. He listened completely, the way he had always listened to important information, but quieter, without the edge of calculation that usually lived in his attention. Zara sat on a bench and watched. She was not warm yet. She was not closed. She was something truer than both, present, watching, waiting to see if the man in front of her would continue to be the man he had been in that hotel room or revert, over time, to the man who trusted folders. She did not know the answer yet. That was honest. She had not waited 4 years to be rescued. She had built a life, a daughter, a self that needed no saving. What she was watching for now was not a hero. Just a person willing to show up. Amara took his hand to point at a duck. He let her. That was enough. For now, that was enough.